Hello and welcome everyone. I've just completed a complete second playtest playthrough of my Memoir 44 double breakthrough map scenario called Force versus Finesse on the Battle of Dubno Brody. And it again resulted in a German win. Again, the difference was relatively minor of 4 victory points. The first time was 3 victory points. And there is something, and I'll just put this thing here to remind me of telling you that. I actually made a mistake on the first test playthrough. Actually, well, not a mistake, but um, the scenario should actually be over once you reach 24 points. The condition of maintaining it for a turn, so that it should be at turn start, only applies to the sudden death condition of occupying the 3 towns of Lutsk, Dubno, and Brody at the same time. So only then do the Soviets have an extra turn to prevent that and recapture at least one of the towns. So, well, now that I've put that straight, one of the changes I made after the first playtest playthrough was that the air power card is indeed also available to the Soviets. If you want to know why, then please refer to the evaluation of the first playtest playthrough. Another addition I made to the scenario then was that the Germans could build one pontoon bridge each on each board. So they could have built another one here, but unfortunately the chance never came up. They never actually got an attack card in that particular sector. They do actually have one now, which they've had for a while, this one here. But it's for this section of the front. Obviously, you should imagine the German player sitting on the other side. So it's actually in the exact opposite direction. So where it says right, it's left, and vice versa. Well, obviously, the best place to build one would be, for instance, here for the Germans, because it would offer them a real shortcut to Dubno. But it never came up, the chance. Had it happened at a certain time in the game, well, that certainly might have been an option. As you can see now, despite the German victory on paper, if you survey the entire board, well, then it doesn't really look like a German victory, because they're actually quite heavily outnumbered now. And partially that's because on the ground reinforcement rolls, the Germans actually for a long time hardly got any reinforcements, and not even many flags, and the Russians were lucky enough to receive just that, but still they lost. Something else that happened was, well, it looks like quite a stalemate here. Had there actually earlier on been the opportunity for the Germans to build a bridge here, that really might have changed things. I think one of the changes I'm going to make, and as you can see here, I've just put this as a reminder, I think I'm also going to make that option available to the Soviets. Whether it's actually entirely historically accurate, that I don't know, but I do think it will make for a much nicer scenario. I will limit it for the Soviets, though, to 1 pontoon bridge total. So one on the complete board, so to speak, and not just per board, as the Germans might actually do if they so choose. Something else, the Russians got quite a few reinforcement, truck reinforcements, supply trucks, and even though it's only one figure, well, from all I've read about the battle is that they were actually in dire supply troubles. So I guess I'm going to remove that option for the Russians, and on that particular roll, the only option available to them, because they can't get any half tracks either, would be an armored car. But that's okay, because there were quite a few armored cars available to the Russians in that particular battle. I've also toyed around with the idea of reducing the number of German supply trucks per unit to 2 rather than 3, but for now I'm going to decide against that, because first of all, the Germans did have an excellent supply situation, and well, secondly, because they also have an option between either 2 half tracks or 2 trucks. If you make it 2 trucks or 2 half tracks, then I would always go for the 2 half tracks, because they have some attack power of their own as well, which the trucks don't. So for now, I'm going to decide against that, but I am going to go with the option that only armored cars are available to the Soviets. Now, I've also been toying around with the idea of exit markers for the Russians, um, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, the orders were actually for the Russians to counterattack right away. It seems most of that is explained by the fact that, contrary to popular myth, that the Russians actually believed that the German attack in this sector was much weaker than it actually was. So an immediate counterattack was ordered, which was given the forces available to each side in the whole supply situation, and the air dominance situation on the part of the Germans was totally impossible. But I've been toying around with the idea of giving a certain sudden death conditions to the Russians as well, of exiting a few units on the other side of the board. But I'm not going to go with that. As far as the victory conditions are concerned, I've also been thinking of making it a prerequisite that the Germans have exited at least 2 units off the board in addition to the 24 victory points. But for now, I'm going to decide against that too. The only change I am going to make for now, besides the one with the armored cars, is that I'm going to allow the Russians to the construction of one pontoon bridge total as well, because at a certain time in the game, the Russians really outnumbered the Germans here in this section on the left-hand side section of the right board. They really heavily outnumbered the Germans in the center too, and had they been able to build a pontoon bridge here, well, this is the situation at the end of the game, but then they really might have pushed through here, and that could in a way symbolize the possibility of inflicting severe hits on the Germans as well. So yeah, that is certainly an option that I'm going to try out, because even though there is an option now for the Germans to build pontoon bridges, which there already was, it did result in, well, there's still quite a stalemate, and you're really dependent on the cards that you draw. They actually built one here, but that turned out to be, and I guess I already knew that, but the Germans got a bit desperate, I guess you could say, because this is, of course, not a very suitable spot. Very easily defensible terrain, and the German advance will be really funneled well, into a death threat, you could say. How did the Germans win this scenario, by the way, in the end? Because of an air attack here, air power card, they eliminated that particular Soviet unit. And over here, after a lone Soviet tank unit had advanced and actually killed a German unit, they ended up here hoping to reclaim the town, but the Germans played all units in the center, maneuvering this tank unit, which attacked it. This unit attacked it, and this unit moved back into the village, which the Germans wanted to retake. One more interesting thing that happened was that actually at a certain point in the battle, the Germans did capture 7 town hexes, reducing the Russians to 5, which meant that they couldn't draw 7 cards anymore for ground reinforcements, but just the 4. And that had a severe impact, obviously. It didn't last long because the Russians retook Lutsk, and that brought them back up to 7 at a certain point. Well, that was 6 then, but they also reclaimed that one at a certain point. So it didn't last very long, but that is certainly possible, and that is how it was intended, that the Russians need to remain in possession of the town hexes and really defend them. So I guess this concludes the second playtest playthrough. I hope I've described to you the changes I'm going to make. I've also told you a bit about how the scenario went. So again, to recap, I'm going to allow the Russians to construct 1 pontoon bridge as well. The Germans can construct 2, 1 on each board. No more supply trucks for the Russians, because obviously they were mostly used to rebuild a reduced artillery unit. And well, that didn't seem quite historically accurate to the battle, both as far as the supply situation is concerned and the artillery that was much less available to the and much less effective than the German one in this particular battle. So I'm going to remove that possibility. I'm going to stick with the 3 German trucks per unit for now. So the Russians will have to take on that particular die roll, which is, I believe, 1 star, 1 infantry, 1 tank, and 1 grenade. They will have to pick the patrol car, and the exit rules for now are going to stay the same. So let's see, because at a certain point again in the battle, the Russians really did have the upper hand, but they couldn't really cross the river at a certain point so as to overwhelm the Germans from there. And you had the Russians on this side, the Germans on that side, and they were both shooting at each other. But also, each side withdrew at particular moments if they would be at a disadvantage, and well, I guess it would make a lot of sense. What I'm kind of hoping for is a possibility to have a massive armor assault played out, and that could particularly win the game. But in order to do that, you cannot have these choke points, well, which, I mean, makes sense and are quite historically accurate. That's why those particular river crossings were actually the focal point in this battle. But for the enjoyment of the scenario, I think adding the options of the pontoon bridges and also one for the Russians, if at a certain moment they feel like, hey, if we construct one, we'll be able to push on across the river and engage the Germans there. That will force the Germans probably to redeploy their units as well. So I think that will make the scenario a lot more dynamic. So that is the change I'm going to try now. So I hope you've enjoyed this little evaluation. Should you have any comments yourself, feel free to post them in the comments. And again, thank you for watching, and see you on the next one.